there's a big debate in the Muslim community, obviously, about how we deal with hip hop. But one thing we have to be cognizant of as a community is that whether we like it or not, our children are being affected by hip hop culture. As kids are looking for their identities, they're looking for things that reflect some aspect of their experience in life. And hip hop tends to speak to encounters that Black people experience with institutions that police them, that have power over them. And it's hip hop that gives the language and expression and this sense of power that maybe we often don't find in other avenues. But going back to the conversation about the African American experience, it's interesting because hip hop is a very distinctly African American originated cultural form of expression. And what you find is that there is a link between the hip hop experience, the culture, and Islam. It might not be perhaps understood in the most sort of classical way, but one thing many people know who I guess study Islam is that many of the early sort of hip hop artists, many of them were in some ways connected to Islam. Many of them were Muslim. Backgrounds where being Muslim was something that was a sense of pride. One thing that you'll often encounter if you go to parts of the United States, you go to Philadelphia, you go to New Jersey, is that people wear their hip hop identity and Islam at the same time. Yeah. And it's become something that in fact is so pervasive that it's unquestioned. It's become part of African American identity. Islam and the Muslim identity is almost synonymous in a way that's almost unquestioned in African American context. And you can't speak about Islam in America without the African American experience. Don't get me wrong. I mean, from a classical sort of theological perspective, many of the ways in which Islam was understood might be considered problematic or lacking in some particular way. But there was a clear identification with Islam as somehow being both a natural religion and a way of reforming the Black community.
Just myself personally, I wasn't really into hip hop, but my brothers were, and now it's actually become something very important in a discussion for me and my family because of my sons being quote unquote contemporary nasheed artists that happen to be their genre is hip hop. So there's always that sort of conflict that they're going through, like, do we sound too, like you're saying, like them, how are we sounding, and then there's like, they would be performing and then, depending on the audience, if it's a majority South Asian audience, especially if the audience is like, have a lot of elderly people, you'll see the reactions, they just can't take it. Like, it's just it's too lively, and, actually, they had one older brother. He came to me and he said, I love them. Mashallah, they're amazing. So confident boys, whatever. But can you please tell that one not to put his hand near his crotch? And I was like, it threw me. I was like, okay, first of all, what exactly are you saying? And he's like, and I said, brother, what? And he's like, it's too much like, the people, it's, we don't want to do that. They don't want, we don't want them to do that, but we want them to be confident. Mashallah, good words, amazing, So, so for them, yeah, it's a complete conflict. And then it even goes beyond the hip hop. It goes into music itself, because what music is okay for, for nasheed, and what it is, it's South Asian music, it's Arab music, and that's okay. You throw in a bunch of, Islamic terminology, and suddenly it's considered a nasheed. But if you, say, sing in English, and you have any other sort of cultural beats behind it, suddenly it's not a nasheed, and it's, I think if I was understanding you correctly, brother, it really is like the stigma and the thing, the views and what they have gotten from the social media and stuff like that. Like the people who have come here, the parents have come here, and they've really taken on this notion of blackness. And the fact that it's completely negative, there isn't anything positive about it, and you can't learn anything from it, you can't gain anything from it. So you need to stay away from it. You have to not be near blackness, or else if you're near blackness at all, you will lose your Islamic identity completely, right? So it negates anyone like me, because I don't have any other identity. Like, I don't have another culture. I don't have, another language. And what do I do with myself? Do I completely rid myself of all of my culture and suddenly become this mishmash, which basically happened, like of, grab here, there, whatever, throw it in there, and, my Eids and my weddings will be like, a big melting pot of all the cultures? Or do I try to take my Afro-Caribbean, Afro-American roots and try to, do something with that in terms of Islam?
Just listening, and this is just my 2 cents. Like, I mean, hip hop and all of that, I don't think it's negative at all. Depending on what type of content we have in it, obviously. But I mean, like, we've been sort of thought that it is negative because it's black people doing what they're doing, right? And we've been doing it very well, and to the point where it's loved by everyone globally. But all that to say that, I went to the U.S. I went to school in the U.S. I took Shahada in the U.S. as well, and it wasn't it's not because I felt welcomed in the black community, or because I read Malcolm X, that I felt like I was blacker, or that, it makes sense, black in Islam. I think this sort of the all those principles in Islam that we have sort of go hand in hand with black struggle, and the African American experience compared to the Canadian, the black Canadian experience. I mean, to say or to try to separate both, I think that would be a gross injustice.